So, hello everyone. I am Sean Ryan, your dungeon master in exile down here in Armidale. At the time of this recording, we do have somewhat dire news in that Tropical Cyclone Alfred is on direct approach to Brisbane. This video will likely not be released by the time it strikes the Queensland southeast coast. So hopefully by the time this reaches you all, you are all still safe and well. But from the past, hello from down here in Armidale. I am most definitely safe on the far southern edges of this weather system. Yeah, I do hope that you all are prepared and that you do stay safe over the coming week. Joining me is someone directly in the storm's path who has sacrificed some of her time to join me here. That is much appreciated. Hello, Ellie.
Hi, Sean. Hi, everyone.
So this format is just going to be a bit of like a free-flowing interview style thing. We're just going to ask Ellie a bunch of questions. The whole idea of this is you may not have played at Ellie's tables, and you're missing out on all the fun on Ellie's side. Whatever the case may be, this is just an opportunity for you to meet kind of the rest of the DM's gang and see what they're all about. So let's get started. So Ellie, you've been with us from quite early in season 1.
Yeah.
Did you actually make the? Were you there on the initial launch day way back on season 1?
No, I was not. I got in at, I think halfway-ish through season 1.
Right. So around the August-ish, or possibly a bit earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I missed like the first 3 weeks or something, so you wouldn't have been all that far behind me. So you didn't quite meet, or you haven't been with us since quite the beginning, but pretty close to.
Yeah.
So what actually brought you into playing Dungeons and Dragons? Did you play any of this before us, or?
Yeah, a little bit. I first got back into it back when I was in high school in 2017, I think. Some friends from high school invited me to play D&D at their place. And then after I left high school, I played it a little bit off and on. At uni and other places, but I didn't actually properly get into it until Carindale when I started attending regularly.
Did you play any other systems other than Dungeons and Dragons, or was it?
No, it was only Dungeons and Dragons 5e. I didn't know much about any of the other systems, and Dungeons and Dragons was the most popular.
Right, yeah. It's definitely the reason we adapted 5e here, is that it just seems to be the standard that most people do know.
Yeah.
My personal preference is for something more like a Pathfinder system. I find
okay.
The 3-action economy over in Pathfinder to open up a lot of more interesting options and challenges and interesting questions. It is not for everyone. It is a more complex system. It certainly has its more to do, I think, with 3.5 than 5e. In regards to your Dungeons and Dragons career, how did you decide to start DMing? Was that just with us, or was that something?
It was just with you. It was just with you guys. It was right after the end of season 1. I think some the Nicomat had put out for people who are interested in DMing. And I reached out to Nick, and he offered to help me prep a session. It was for the Halloween games at the end of season 1, I think.
Oh right, the transition period. Yes, they were a lot of fun.
Yeah, the transition period. Yeah. So I DM'd one game with them, and Nick was sort of playing and sort of helping me.
Cool,
But he sat with me on Discord and helped me sort of prep a session. And then from there, I sort of, as I DM'd on my own a little bit more, I sort of got the hang of DMing and sort of developed my own way, and it became a lot less intimidating as I went on.
Comes easier with practice. I think those interim between season sessions, I think those are a great time for new DMs, because there really isn't any. I mean, there often isn't in our story arcs anyway. You can just do unrelated one-shots. There's no problem with that. But with that interim period, like we're really calling for just those unconnected storylines that are, or perhaps edged a bit towards more the silly as opposed to the serious. And so I think it does take the pressure off a lot. What was your first session like? Like, what did you actually do?
I ran a Halloween. It was a Halloween themed one, so I ran like a sort of horror movie slasher sort of thing set in like a summer camp. The players had to like investigate all these areas, and they would fight the boss, like the killer, at like each of these places, and it then led them down to like the secret basement where there was like these witches and stuff.
Right, so like the boss was harassing them as they're progressing down through the dungeon.
Yeah.
It's like a vampire or something would, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So like they would go to different parts of the camp, like the boathouse, and it would be like a different type of monster.
Yeah.
And then it would die, and then they'd go to another place, and it would be like there is a different monster.
Cool, nice. Definitely sounds quite, well, perhaps horrible. Not something you might be running, perhaps, in your 4 o'clock sessions.
Yeah.
I mean, well, talk us through this. I mean, at the moment, you went from there to DMing quite regularly. I dare say you're doing, or you're behind the screen as a dungeon master more often than I am, especially nowadays. So you're DMing down in Springfield as well. That's keeping that up every week, and then also for us.
Yeah, I usually I DM a lot more at Springfield, just to avoid burnout. But I DM usually at Springfield every like 2 weeks DMing, 2 weeks playing.
Right, 2 on 2 off.
Yeah. Just so that way I can like if I have any like if I'm running any like 2-part games or I'm playing in any 2-part games, so that way I don't have to like miss one.
Right.
Or like take a break in between DMing a 2-part like story. So
you're doing that, and on top of that, you're also a regular running the children's tables from 4 to 6 at Carindale. And I believe we have upcoming like a pretty much dedicated children's session. That's that whole weekend from the 12th through several days. Hopefully that's still going, because we, the pub isn't picked up by a cyclone and magically transported halfway to Ipswich. So I assume you're going to be running sessions with that?
Yes, I won't be doing it for the 12th and 13th because I'm down at the Gold Coast for Supernova.
Of course.
But the other 2 on the school holidays I will be running.
Right, nice. So is there anything different about how you approach running a table for children? I mean, you mentioned on your first session you dived right into like the slash. Yes.
Definitely a lot more. I keep things. Most of my sessions are always like sort of PG, kid friendly anyway. Even with the horror ones, I've run that one a few times, like Halloween last year, and they had kids at the table. But I kept it a lot towards more on the end of like horror adjacent, like still horror theme, but like more like not too gory. I never keep my quests too gory. But especially when I'm dealing with kids, it's especially different for ones. A lot of kids are usually new to D&D, but haven't played much before. So a lot of time they'll try out things that adults don't normally think to do. So I have to be prepared a lot more for the possibility of it being derailed. I remember a couple of weeks ago, the teen group I DM'd for a lot at Springfield. I had a vampire as like the boss for like they had to go through this tunnel, and they found this whole city that was run by vampires. Instead of fighting the vampire, one of the players decided to make the vampire their wife, and ended up falling in love with the vampire and convincing her to fall in love with them. So I just kind of ran with that.
Okay.
So it's a lot more, like, I had to be prepared a lot. Even the one I ran just yesterday, had the teens again. They decided that I had a gelatinous cube as like a fodder enemy. They decided to start worshipping the gelatinous cube, and ended up turning it into a god. So there's a lot of stuff like that sometimes become a lot more chaotic with kids.
It
Um,
it reminds me of an old a book series I read way back as a kid, where the central premise of it is the world, essentially our real world, has wizards. They just don't make themselves known for the most
oh
part.
yeah,
But the idea is that most wizards become wizards as adults, because it's a serious job and it requires a level of maturity. But every now and then, a kid becomes a wizard when they need something really ridiculous done because they don't know or care what is impossible, and that
Yeah.
just allows them to stretch their abilities in ways that adults just
Yeah.
wouldn't.
Kids have a lot more like the kids can sometimes be a lot more like creative sometimes. Well, they have a lot more ideas that are very crazy.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Also,
I don't know if they have more ideas that are crazy, but they certainly seem much more willing to act on them.
yeah. And then also sometimes as well, some kids, especially at Springfield, we sometimes have kids that have like special needs and stuff like that there. So sometimes they'll need a bit more guidance than some other kids. So because of how like the sessions run at Carindale and Springfield, we're sort of time sensitive. We can only run sort of like 3 or 4 hour one shots. Sometimes I'll have to like take out a combat or something so that we don't run out of time, but I can still, help the player out and help them understand like how everything works without, making everything go over time.
Yeah, it would definitely be there's certainly a crazier test of time management in general.
Yeah.
And of your ability to structure a session and keep things on track when you know that it's going to be derailed at every opportunity. It's not just going to be that one player who's going to do things a bit crazy. It's like, no, there's a table full of kids, a table full of players just like that.
Yeah.
We began our story in season 3, Worlds at War. We actually did begin it with a bit of a mention of Jinx. Before we dive right into that, you mind introducing like your main character? Just who is Jinx Velvetpaw for those who haven't met her before?
Jinx Velvetpaw was my player character for season 2. She's a Tabaxi pirate captain that sort of runs around like with her crew. She used to like attack like government ships and like other pirates that had slaves, and she'd like free those slaves and stuff. She became my main character for season 1, and her story progressed a lot in season 2 with her crew and with her fellow guild members. She is a Tabaxi rogue swashbuckler with. In Carindale, I had her with a level in fighter. Then now DMing, I have her as my DMPC. She is she's decided that her abilities are better suited reining in the pirates that fled Fangflower rather than going on adventures. So she's now level 20, 16 rogue for ranger. So yeah, she helped build a floating city at Neptune's Reach, and she is pretty much running things for the Western Free Folk faction. But currently she is trying to track an underground soil trade in Eleonora.
Right, and that's quite interesting that she ended up out with the Free Folk faction, because our beginning of season 3 was captured through Whisper's World Tour.
Yes.
He decided to take off and do a lap of Eleonora, and where the rest of the guild very much remained caught up in what became the Verdant Kingdoms in their old ancestral heartlands on the banks of the Tankiri River. Whisper finds Jinx at Neptune's Reach, at this floating city of boats, ocean jetsam, let's call it, just all tied together. Finds her on literally the other side of the world. It is far enough west that it's almost east, and finds her out there with with some of her companions. So what? I guess so. What drew Jinx out there, and what's kept her out there so far? Do you want to describe just your story so far this season? What's Jinx been up
So,
to in early season 3?
so she's mostly been like she found her calling was better. The Pirates of Fangflower needed like without someone to like sort of rein them in. She figured that they would cause a lot more problems for the rest of the world and for the little warriors. So she figured it was best for her to sort of set up shop there with her crew and sort of keep things running, keep things sort of like almost like tied together, like so that they needed structure. But now that because their home in Fangflower was gone, they probably would have without the Western Free Folk and becoming a faction and Neptune's Reach, they probably just would have scattered everywhere. So Jinx gave them essentially a place to like a home in exchange for not being too on the crazy side and being too evil and causing too many problems.
Right, but
And
she clearly sees some potential in them though, because she didn't just let them
yes,
scatter. She has actually organized them into a faction that can possibly rival and
yeah,
maybe even retake Fangflower Bay at some point.
yeah,
So it's an interesting dynamic. She could easily
yeah,
be brought into conflict with her own friends at the guild
yeah.
because of this, but it's very much a conflict of her choosing, isn't it?
Yeah, like she does take a lot more. She takes a very like hands-off approach to managing them. Like she oversees the faction as a whole, but she doesn't necessarily dictate what they do. Aside from like certain things that they're not allowed to approach New Theaton. That that is off limits.
Yeah.
And they can't. They're not. A lot of pirates. Well, on the evil side. So like she's trying to limit like those sort of things, like attacking innocents, that sort of thing. She's trying to turn them more into like she's more just reining them in rather than fully controlling them and
Right.
like bossing them around.
When we got out to Neptune's Reach, and Jinx had her little run-in with a red-haired mohawk man who may or may not have been Whisper, we encountered some of her crew. Conspicuously absent was Scratch, also a name that is conspicuously absent from your current name on Discord.
Yes.
Can you describe for me what the relationship is between Bex and Scratch? They're certainly described as twins, but
Yes.
that often implies like a very close connection. Is it
They
actually that close? What's going on
they are very close, but Bex has just like their paths have sort of split a bit. Without getting into too much spoilers, Bex has decided to follow. They're both following in Jinx's footsteps, but in different ways. Bex has decided to become a little warrior, going out on adventures, whereas Scratch has more taken the route of wanting to become a pirate like Jinx. So she doesn't really want to be a little warrior anymore. Like they both came to Jinx with the intention. They snuck. Well, they didn't come to Jinx. They snuck aboard her ship as kids.
there?
But they've sort of diverged in their own paths now. But they are still pretty close. They just haven't gotten the chance to interact that much. With Bex currently stationed out on the outskirts of New Theaton, protecting it from any wannabe pirate that thinks they're better than Jinx.
And Scratch's location unknown?
She is currently stationed with Jinx, usually at Neptune's Reach or on Jinx's ship. Currently, whenever Jinx goes on a quest, she usually like if they need to send out little warriors on like a ship or something. Scratch is usually the one taking them places in Eleonora.
And how does this compare to Seraphine and Aveline? Also, another set of twins that you have.
Yes, their story is a lot more of a contrast. They started out close, but then Seraphine They as a kids they started seeing they both talked to the same imaginary friend in quotation marks that was actually their god, Relaine, who they don't know is Relaine. She would speak to them in dreams, and Seraphine received visions of their home. They grew up in a small village somewhere in the Verdant Kingdoms, but it's not anywhere on the map. It's just too small. But she received a vision of their home being caught in the crossfire of some sort of war. So at 16 or 17, she set off on her own, left in the middle of the night, leaving only a note, going to gents to join up in the military. And she spent the next 5 or so years going up the ranks to becoming a general, and only really returned once she found out that their parents had passed away of old age and sickness. But that caused them to sort of grow distant, and they ended up getting into a fight. And refused to agreed to never talk to each other for the rest of ever. But then they both got told by their god to join the Little Warriors and set up a bastion where they were unbeknownst to each other. It was the same bastion. Their god did not tell them that part. All their god said was that you will meet another cleric.
So they literally just show up at the bastion's location to start building it, and they're just going to look across the plot at each other.
So it's been very tense. The tension is very thick there, very awkward for all the hirelings that are there. But they are both currently building, helping to rebuild Old Theaton. But due to some recent, so they've been mostly just avoiding each other and not talking. But they do still care about each other. They're just stubborn. And
there's still that age-old disagreement that's still, yes.
They have very different ideals. So Seraphine is a war cleric, whereas Aveline is a peace cleric. So they have very different ideals on how things should be done. But also, they do still care about each other. And due to some recent things in the quest that Seraphine has been on, she is sort of missing being, talking to her sister and stuff. So I am going to write up a roleplay with them soon of them sort of hashing things out and at least starting to talk.
Cool. Okay. As we're recording this, the 2024 Monster Manual has just recently been published.
It's very good.
Have you
been using it a lot?
You've been using it? Okay, I was going to say, have you gotten a chance to really dive through it?
Yes, I love the new layout of how all the stat blocks are done. It makes it a lot easier for me to read and process everything.
And what's your favourite monster out of there?
See, I think so far, definitely, I really like Mind Flayers a lot. They're just a really good D&D villain. Really good D&D monster, these brain-eating hive mind of tentacle monsters sort of thing. But I also really like humanoid enemies a lot too. Sometimes it's just fun to play this evil guy that's not some sort of monstrous race. It's just a bad person that needs to be sort of stopped. Whether they're an evil wizard, trying to raise the dead, or an evil pirate that's kidnapping people. It's good to just sometimes play have a villain that's just a bad guy that's not part of some monstrous race.
They certainly make for more complex storylines. So I think or something like an Elder Templist that has unknowable motives, or just a gigantic wyvern or something that just wants to eat you. Certainly that can be certainly fun to come up against, but it doesn't really make for compelling stories, does it?
Yeah, anyone can become any human can become a villain. The wrong decisions, even whether they're manipulated or forced, it provides a very compelling storyline of how easy it is for to slip up and go down that path. Even someone who's good can sort of go down that path of evil. or they have good intentions, but they think what they're doing is good, but it's actually hurting others.
William Brigham meant well. What can I say? So, with that, we do need to be careful for spoilers.
Yes.
Because you and I certainly know that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes that you have skirted around and have done quite well in not specifically giving the game away or mentioning. But so far in phase 1 of season 3, we have gotten around to running adventures on all of our core worlds. We know pretty much like the basic worlds that we're going to be exploring, for the most part. Although there's certainly going to be some interesting, how to say, some divergent paths where we get a little bit further off the beaten track.
Yes.
What are you looking forward to? Possibly like without including that place that we won't mention. I think we both know what we're talking about there. Without including there, what location are you looking forward to visiting coming up?
There's definitely a lot. Like, I'm really interested in a lot of the places in Faerun, but I also still have an attachment to Eleonora. I really liked it in season 2, so it's really interesting seeing how much it's changed and how much it is changing. But I also really like, as a spectator, I also really like reading up on Miko and Skip's storyline in Cosmos. It's very interesting.
Are you planning on running anything in Cosmos? You did express an interest in it early on.
Possibly. Mostly with Jinx's storyline, she's mostly focused on Eleonora. Like, there's a lot of stuff, like, she wants to make sure, like, you know, that even with all this other stuff going on all the other worlds, that the little warriors don't lose sight of Eleonora as well. So she wants to sort of mainly stay stationed in dealing with things on Eleonora, so that
has been an ongoing theme. Yes.
Yes, because Jinx is from Eleonora. She's always that's been her home, and she wants to make sure that the little warriors don't fall off that path of ignoring Eleonora again, because she's seen firsthand of what it's caused. But I do definitely want to explore some other places in the multiverse as a DM. And
we're already towards the end of phase 1. We've introduced most of the factions, and I think about the only faction that's in immediate danger of falling off a cliff is probably just the Free Nations of Greyhawk. They just got caught in, they really just got the hard mode start from Civilization there, just caught between a rock and a hard place. But everyone else looks like they're going to survive for at least the immediate future. Which faction are you cheering for right now? Which has really kind of caught your
There's
heart?
Definitely quite a few. I don't particularly like what they're doing, but I do prefer the Divine Order over the Red Wizards. Very much prefer them. Don't know if I'm necessarily cheering for them, but they are definitely the lesser of two evils in a way.
Right. And how does the Arcane Eye kind of factor in? Because that very much adds that third, I guess, you'd have to call them the lesser of three evils, realistically, because Kelvin's, again, one of those interesting characters who certainly means well and is trying to do his best, but things are getting a little out of his control, aren't they?
Yeah, it's very interesting. But I also like some of the factions in Eleonora. Mostly the Western Free Folk I'm cheering for a lot. I really love pirates. It's always been a favourite sort of thing of mine. But I'm also really don't know if another one is the Empire, the EL Empire. I don't know if I'm necessarily cheering for them, but I do really like. It's very interesting seeing how they're rebuilding after the loss of their Empress in season 2. It's definitely interesting seeing how different it is and what direction it takes.
Yes, sadly, many of my phase 1 adventures had to do more with Cinder from the Eel Empire, and sadly they've had to fall by the wayside the way things have worked out. But Cinder is definitely a favourite character of mine through season 3. She's quite conflicted. She certainly has an interesting relationship with Al-Hazir.
Yes.
She's a hothead. She's definitely one of those who has her own ideas about what she wants, and is not going to hesitate at jumping opportunities to get it. But in that lack of hesitation, in that decisiveness, could easily bite off more than she can chew. We'll have to see what comes out of that. I presume like Jinx is the central story arc
Yes.
of your plans for season 3.
Yes.
What's coming up? Again, without talking too much about spoilers, we know that
Yes.
certainly the end of Phase 3 is a historical halfway point and a big reveal
Yes.
in our storyline, and we both know what's coming there, even if our players don't
Yeah.
necessarily. So as we approach that, what can you talk about?
Well, there's a lot of, without giving away too much, the main thing is to keep an eye on where her crew is sort of traveling within Eleonora, and also things that might come up in the role plays. There are some hints in there on what's actually going on, but that may or may not be connected, or may not yet be connected to the end storyline. Only time will really tell how that goes. I definitely have plans in my head, but as the season goes, some things might change.
You know, they always say like, the best plans never seem to survive first contact with the players, do they?
Exactly. But I have actually had one of my sort of main-ish villains for the storyline so far show up in one of my quests. In the recent quest where they were stopping a deal, but the little warriors were stopping a deal between the necromancers of Eol, the J. Cullen loyalists, and the barony of Duclay. There was a strange hooded figure that was giving them like soil, but when the fight started, they summoned a demon and with a spell, and then just teleported out.
Yes.
But they haven't shown up again since.
What that possible connection might be. But yes, we have seen people such as Dumouth do similar things before.
Yeah.
Was that him?
No, it was not Dumouth.
Oh, you're going to reveal that right now? Sure. Okay. Yeah. Was not Dumouth.
There's someone specifically dealing with an Eleonora-centric thing.
If not Dumouth, who on earth could it possibly be? Yeah, sounds like a lot of fun. Sorry, I'm going to likely miss the immediate future of it, but I will be up there later in the year. I'm sure I'll get a chance to play at your table sometime. Yeah, I think that pretty much just wraps it up. I am quite conscious of time and quite conscious of the fact that you do have a cyclone to prepare for. So I think we will wrap that up here, but thank you very much for joining us. To our viewers and to our players and fellow DMs who may be watching this, stay safe. I hope you did enjoy this version of, well, whatever it is that we're calling this. I believe we're just going to call it something like Meet the DMs. I had a better name than that, and then the weekend happened, and now I don't.
Yeah.
So we'll have to come up with something, but I hope you did all enjoy this.
Yes.
There will be, well, I have had interest from other DMs on doing something similar, so there will be more to follow. But to everyone in Carindale, wish you all the best, and I do hope to see you sometime in the near future. Ellie, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for interviewing me.
No worries, and hope you enjoyed yourself, and hope to see you up there shortly.